Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video we are going to the state of Georgia, to the city of Atlanta, to look at one of those, those love triangle thingies. Or was it? Dun dun dun. This case is so bizarre in so many ways, but there are three names to know. Rusty, Andrea, and Hemy. With Hemy being the biggest nutbar of all. He would say, that angels and demons were talking to him. Yeah, it's like, the dog told me to do it, one of them. Maybe. The truth is always murky, and never more so than in this old one. So let's give it a go. Dunwoody, that's where we are today, a prestigious suburb of Atlanta north of the city proper. It's leafy, it's clean cut, and people living there can afford to. Big bucks for the buckos. That's where the Sneidermans lived. The hardworking parents and their two young children lived in a quiet cul-de-sac, secluded, and that's the way they liked it. The parents being Russell, who went by Rusty, and Andrea Sneiderman. Both Rusty and Andrea had attended the University of Indiana before moving to Atlanta and starting their little old family, which would go on to include children, Sophia and Ian. Andrea, starting in 2010, she worked full-time at GE Energy as a quality systems manager, while Rusty was an entrepreneur, setting up his own business called Star Voicemail. That's exactly what it sounds like, by the way. It was sort of like Cameo, but you'd get celebrities to record voicemails for you. But they also had a computer program so that they could get a celebrity to say whatever they wanted. Gimmicky app shit, it's that. The Sneidermans were well liked in the area. They were especially well respected in their own Jewish community. They took part in charities. They helped out. They were a kind sort. They were good souls. Yeah, but then came the morning of November 18th, 2010. It started out, as they always do, as any other weekday. Everyone was up and at 'em. Andrea drove their 5-year-old Sophia to kindergarten, dropping her off on her way to work. Rusty took 3-year-old Ian to preschool, Dunwoody Prep, a very prestigious preschool. The first step to Harvard. Wow. Although Rusty himself, he actually had an MBA from Harvard. Expectations. So mother, daughter, father, son, they went their separate ways. That very morning, Rusty, he drove his son to the preschool. It was located on the corner of a village mall. Drove into the car park, parked up, walked his son into the preschool, said his goodbyes, and then walked out. And as he was walking back through the car park towards his car, someone came up and shot him 4 times. The shooter then fled, leaving Rusty to bleed out on that early November morning, as people were coming to and from. A couple ran up to Rusty as he lay on the ground, called 911, and they tried to help. A pediatric doctor arrived from his office just around the corner and started CPR. It didn't look good though for Rusty. He had lost a lot of blood. The emergency services arrived within minutes, but by the time he arrived at Atlanta Medical Center, there was nothing they could do. He had lost too much blood. Their efforts to save his life were in vain. Rusty was beloved by kind of all he met, a hard-working community fella. So what was going on behind the scenes? Rusty was raised in Cleveland, Andrea, Sylvania, both Ohioans, yeah? They met at the University of Indiana and started dating in September 1994, when they went on a retreat. They hit it off, and nearly from their very first date, they knew they would marry, which they did in December 2000. They worked hard, eventually buying the house in Dunwoody. They also owned a second weekend house in Eatonton. When the recession hit in 2008, well, they were hit too. Both couples' jobs had a big old question mark on them, until Andrea landed her job in GE Energy in April 2010. This stability then gave Rusty the opportunity to enter the business world with Star Voicemail. But Rusty, he, for this $1 million idea, he needed investors. So did he meet some, shady ones? In fact, A week before he was murdered, right, get a load of this, Rusty called 911 from his home, saying there was a shady, suspicious character loitering about. This guy seemed to be in disguise, right? Obviously it worried Rusty enough to call 911, and he said this guy seemed to be packing iron.
Running, I think he has a gun in his back pocket, and now he's running away. I don't know who the hell he is, and I don't want him by my house. He was wearing a hat and earmuffs, black mustache.
Weird guy with a gun hanging outside your house. A week later, you're killed with a gun. Coinkydink? As the investigation began, it became clear quick that Rusty's murder was a planned execution. There was multiple reasons for this determination. The shooter, who was seen by a good few people that morning, was described as a white guy, 5'10", 5'11", wearing a hoodie and what seemed to be a fake beard. Maybe what the guy he saw a week before was wearing. He shot Rusty multiple times at close range, 3 times while he lay on the ground. He wanted to be sure. The shooter then legged it to a getaway vehicle, a silver minivan, no plates. But as a suburb near schools, play schools, mom and pop minivans, dime a dozen at rush hour. On the 19th of November, the detectives went to the Sneiderman home to speak with them about Rusty's business dealings. They also had a search warrant for the home and to seize Rusty's computer, see who he had been in contact with. They also happened to ask Andrea one simple question. In the past year, has anyone expressed romantic interest in you? She said, yeah, like immediately. Her boss at GE Energy. She tried to make it clear, though, that nothing ever happened. You know, she shut that shit down right away. Did she, though? Her boss was Hemy Neuman, and he was arrested for the murder of Rusty on the 4th of January 2011, something he denied when he spoke with the police.
You okay? You alright? It's unnerving. I hope I don't make it unnerving for you, because I am. I'm going to talk to you about the day of the shooting, but as everybody else, I'm going to read you your rights on it. Your Miranda rights. Well, you never know. I just want to talk to everybody about that day, and I'm asking everybody to be honest and truthful with me, and just recall the day as you remember. Do I have to worry? I don't think so. I'm not worried. You're fine. Listen, you're helping us. You got the information. You're flowing with it. I mean, for a guy that says, "What do I know?" You're giving me a lot. He's up to 5 pages already.
Ask me about the car and
Ask you questions about Rusty and Andrea. I'm trying to get into their lives. I can't get into them without. I have to find out about them. The only way I'm going to find out about them is if I join them. Andrea's not at a point right now, I'll be honest with you. She's not at a point where I can just go talk to her and sit down with her. You know, she's got so many emotions going on, and let's face it, you can probably tell her probably not the most congealed guy you want to talk to, you know, but that's just the nature of the beast. You know, I can't sit there and console her, and I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a therapist. You know, I'm just somebody looking into why this happened to her family. She wants to know why her family is destroyed, you know, why her kids don't have a father, why she don't have a husband. That's all she keeps asking. You know, and I'm around asking all these people that they know, and they want to know, you know, am I suspect? What am I doing? You know, am I? Who knows? I mean, read them all. If I have to, yeah. I mean, do what I got to do. I mean, talk to everybody I have to, and it is. This is your waiver of rights. Having these rights in mind, I waive and give up these rights and willingly make a statement. You willing to talk to me right now to help me find the person that did this to Andrea and her family?
yeah, but I'm not going to waive rights. I'm not. I don't know where you're going with this.
We're looking into what's happened on that day.
I mean, I have these rights, and now you're saying that I'm waiving them. What does that mean?
Here, having these rights, what I've just read to you, are you willing to give up these rights and willingly talk to me? Make a statement. Are you willing to talk to me?
Okay, so why didn't you give me this an hour ago?
Because I wanted to see what you knew. Did you know Andrea? Did you know Rusty? How well you know him? See where we're going with it.
Where you're going with this.
That's just a conversation. This is a conversation. You have information. You know Andrea. You know Rusty better than I do. I met Andrea twice. The day of the shooting, and maybe the day of the funeral. Well, maybe Schindler. Friday night before the funeral. Met them 2 times. And I've got a task ahead of me to find out who did this. Hemy, this is what we got. We got that van on video the day Rusty shot. And I swear, the more I look at you, the more I see the person inside that van.
What do you think should be done to the person that shot Rusty?
What do I think should be done to John Rusty?
What kind of question is that? Damn straightforward.
No, but why are you're sitting here accusing me of doing that?
So
And you're saying you believe,
and you're sitting over there,
and you're saying you believe that, and now you want me to answer a question.
and you're sitting over there neither confirming or denying that you're the person that shot him. My question is, if you're now, are you telling me, are you prepared to tell me now you're not the guy? Because you haven't said that. All afternoon, you have not said, I did not damn do it. Interesting.
He's right, because I told you so many times, look me in the eye, tell me you didn't do it. You didn't.
He's absolutely right. Not once. So,
Look, you guys are you're crying me.
The getaway car that morning, a silver Kia Sedona, was linked to him. It was a rental, something he rented the day before the murder and returned the day of. Inside, police found synthetic hair, probably from the fake beard.
They believe this was definitely a targeted killing. The father of 2, a Harvard MBA, gunned down right there in the Dunwoody Prep parking lot. So many questions here from the Dunwoody community. At this point, though, police say they still do not have a lot of answers to share. They will not tell us at the moment what they believe the motive in this case is, and they will not tell us a lot about Hemy Neuman. What they do say is they believe they have the man behind the crime. They have charged him with murder.
The trial for Hemy Neuman was set for February 2012. And a lot more was learned about old Hemy. For one, he was broke. He had massive debt. His wife had kicked him out a few weeks before the murder, and actually filed for divorce, accusing Hemy of, ellipses, adultery. The person involved in this alleged adultery, they weren't named in that document. Doesn't take a genius to figure out who she was talking about, though. And so the trial began. First, Hemy pled not guilty, and then he pled guilty by reason of insanity. Andrea, as his employee, wink wink, she took the stand during the trial. She took the stand going against the advice of her own lawyers. And it would end up being a huge mistake.
You never told them on January 4th, I know who it is, it's Hemy Neuman, did you?
That's correct.
You took them down a rabbit hole and tried to get them to look at all these other people, didn't you?
No, sir, I did not.
Why were you protecting the defendant?
I was not.
Why didn't you mention his name?
Have you seen what's happened to my life?
Have you seen what's happened to Rusty?
Have you noticed what's happened to my life since Hemy was murdered? Since Hemy murdered my husband?
This was due to the fact that in the months leading up to the trial, a lot had been learned about Hemy and Andrea. A lot. Both the prosecution and defense agreed there was more to their relationship than just, co-workers, employees. And so they dug. No shit did they friggin' dig. As part of Andrea's job in GE Energy, she would visit sites across America, and sometimes beyond too. She'd be out of Atlanta at least once a month. And not always alone. Now this part is all from the forensic psychologist, who interviewed everybody in the case, talking about 200 hours of interviews she conducted before the trial. She interviewed everybody, except Andrea, who refused to speak with her.
It's a pattern of pushing him away, pulling him toward her, pushing him away, pulling him toward her. And the part that's dangerous about doing that at that time with Mr. Newman is that he was already delusional about his relationship with her. And when somebody is delusional, they're going to see things that are not there. Well, she was giving him signs that were there. And so that is what makes it even more concerning.
Were you and the defendant romantically involved?
No.
Hemy and Andrea would go on these trips together, and they got to know each other real well. The first trip they took together was to Melbourne, Florida, in May 2010, a month after she started working with him, 6 months before Rusty's murder. Then, a month later, in June, they took a trip together, work trip, to Virginia, and, after their day of work was done, they started opening bottles of wine and opening up to each other. Hemy was the son of a Holocaust survivor. His dad had been in Auschwitz, and obviously this had a huge impact on Hemy growing up. Hemy was sent by his father to a boarding school in Israel at a young age, so he had some abandonment issues, something that would stick with him for his life. The relationship was not good at all, and Hemy would suffer abuse. These were all things that Hemy entrusted to Andrea, and she comforted him, and they would drink, and they would dance, and they would so on. Hemy developed feelings for Andrea, but she tried to shut that shit down. Right, but at the same time, she would tell Hemy, man, me and Rusty are going through some rough spots, things aren't great on the home front. So I guess Hemy kind of saw an opening. During one trip to Nevada, Hemy would read her love poetry and give her foot massages. So, if she was trying to shut that shit down, she was doing a really poor job at that. So this then, to Hemy, the tire kicking on her part, led him to think maybe there's something here. She went on another trip, alone this time, for a few days, that is, until he followed, inventing a reason to go. Before she went, he had flowers and chocolates for her in her room, and when she arrived, she changed the room from single to double. She would then introduce Hemy to her family and her kids, New dad candidate, maybe. In August, they went on a trip together to South Carolina, and what started out as joined rooms became joined beds. Things got, hot and heavy. The next morning, though, she said, this is a mistake. The climax, leading to guilt on her part. Hemy was in way too deep, though, at this stage. He was like, fuck no. He asked Andrea to marry him. A friend named Shayna would take the stand, telling of their affair.
At some point in time after the murder, did you have an opportunity to discuss with Andrea whether she was having the affair before the murder? Did you have that discussion again after the murder?
After the murder, yes.
Okay. Did Andrea admit or deny an affair with her boss at that time after the murder?
Denied it.
Based on all the time you've known Andrea, based on your observations of her, her mannerisms, when she told you no, did you believe her?
No, but my heart really wanted to.
She spoke of a work trip she was on to Glasgow. They say England in the video. They went to Scotland. It's just... Anyway, Hemy and Andrea were there, and dancing, maybe more than dancing.
This is a gentleman who has bothered you with, I love you,
Yep.
and marry me.
Yep.
And it's a fantastic idea to go with him to a dance club in England?
If that's how you're reading the email, I suppose that's...
Then tell me how to read it. I just know English.
Back in the Sneiderman's abode, things weren't good. Rusty and Andrea fighting. Rusty, maybe he resented Andrea because she was now the breadwinner. Arguments over the kids. She would tell this to Hemy. In October, they went on another trip. And at one point they were in a bar. A bartender would take the stand during the trial, said she saw Hemy and Andrea dancing, kissing, saying they looked like a couple.
They were groping each other, I know, because I kind of turned away.
Now let me say, you said each other. Was each party doing the groping? That's what you're describing?
Yes.
Okay, please.
He had his hands on her rear end, and she was hugging him, and they looked like a couple. I mean, groping, like touching each other.
Go ahead. Okay. At any time did you see the parties kiss?
Yes, I did.
In this case, when you're talking about alleged affairs and someone else's husband being murdered, I think people tend to think they saw a lot of things.
Once again after this, though, Andrea pushed him off. He said, no, this is wrong. I feel guilty. Can't do this again. I made a huge mistake. Again and again and again and again. Here's the crux, though, of all of this. Was this the trigger for Hemy? was Hemy manipulated into killing Rusty. Hemy spent a lot of time with psychologists in the run-up to the trial, and he was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. It ran in the family. He would also tell them demons appeared to him, telling him to go with them, which he thought meant suicide.
He felt the presence of a demon, and he described the demon as much bigger than him, and that he felt very small.
This demon visited him from time to time and had a voice similar to Barry White. He was also visited by an angel from time to time with a similar voice to Olivia Newton-John. The angel told him that Rusty and Andrea's kids were actually his and Andrea's kids, and that they were in danger, that Rusty hurt them.
His belief was that he was having more than an affair with Andrea Sneiderman. He believed that he was the father of her children, and that his children were in danger. That's where this rescue delusion comes in. And that he was going to protect them by killing Mr. Sneiderman, and that he would then afterwards be with what he calls his family. My evaluation indicates that, in fact, he's had untreated bipolar disorder since he was a teenager.
So then Hemy made a plan to kill Rusty. On Halloween, he bought a handgun and started out on a path that would lead to Rusty's death. He was outside Rusty's home the week before when Rusty called the police. Essentially, though, as Rusty was with his son, he let him be.
And I had a meeting with Hemy that day. And I told Hemy exactly what happened on the side of my house. And I told the person that worked for me, I told Hemy, I told like 6 other people also what happened on the side of my house, because it was bizarre and scary. And he stared at me and looked at me, and it was him the whole time.
Did you know that then?
No. How could I know that? He was sitting there like an absolute normal individual. He came to work. He was at work. For all I know, he was at work that entire time. I don't care. We don't work in the same building. I don't know where he was at that time.
Okay.
Rusty didn't recognize him. Well, how would Rusty recognize him? He was wearing a disguise. He described him as a Mexican worker.
The defense said he planned it all himself, because if Andrea knew, she wouldn't want to be with him. Rusty had to go, so Hemy could be with what he thought was his family. But they also, the defense that is, said that Andrea knew about his mental instability and took advantage of it. She went with him on travels, spent a lot of time. She would have to know.
Prior to November 18, 2010, did the defendant ever tell you that he was having hallucinations?
No.
Did he ever appear to you that he was having hallucinations?
No, he appeared extremely normal individual.
There, the manipulation defense came in.
He was already delusional about his relationship with her. And when somebody is delusional, they're going to see things that are not there. Well, she was giving him signs that were there. And so that is what makes it even more concerning. So he was already delusional. He already had this thought that the children were his and he was going to have this relationship forever and ever afterwards with her. And it's not all in his head, because she was, in fact, having sex with him.
Now, Andrea denied all of pretty much what I just said.
When the defendant told you that, did it bother you that he had feelings for you?
Did it bother me?
Did it bother you?
Yes.
Did you express that to the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever report the defendant's contact to anybody at GE?
No.
Why not?
I would have been fired.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your response.
I would have been fired.
She said she shut Hemy down from coast to coast. The furthest their, non-work relationship got was one time they held hands. And she said that after they just, simple holding hands, she felt incredibly guilty that was a betrayal enough of Rusty. Never went any further than that.
Hemy Neuman says, "This is the last one from me. I know it won't help, but please never forget how much I love you."
Uh-huh.
And how did you respond?
I know, but so do other people. I betrayed them all. I'm not sure how to deal with that for now, but my burden, not yours.
What happened in Greenville, man?
We were holding each other's hands, and that's it. It may sound worse than it is, but to me, that was a betrayal.
So you're repenting in the email, at least, from holding his hand?
Yep.
And this is the same email where he says you and he woke up together in Denver. And that's the same place.
No, he didn't say we said we woke up Friday morning in Denver. He was there. He doesn't say that we woke up together. Okay, you added that.
When we woke up
on Friday morning in Denver. Yeah, that's what he said.
But she did say to a friend one time that if she was single, if Rusty was out of the picture, she'd be open to it. Then, of course, there was, Rusty had a big 2 and 6 zeros of life insurance, something Andrea got 3 months after his death. The prosecution said this was enough for Hemy and Andrea to start a new life together. The prosecution also said that if Hemy did have bipolar disorder, he was never treated for it. He wasn't on any medication. He didn't have any psychiatrist. So,
Hemy Neuman, on November 18th, 2010, did not have the mental capacity to distinguish right from wrong at the time of the shooting.
Andrea Sneiderman, master manipulator. I suggest to you that if you think for a second that Andrea Sneiderman did not know what she was doing, did not manipulate Hemy, did not suggest to Hemy, did not plant seeds to Hemy, then I don't think you're taking a reasonable look at the case. Well, she's lying because she knows that she put this in motion and manipulated Hemy to do this, and she knows that if Hemy's questioned, it's going to lead back to her. Duh.
Hemy Neuman killed Rusty Sneiderman because he wanted his wife, because he wanted his money, because he wanted his life. Period. That is not mental illness. So if he knew he was legally wrong, or if he knew he was morally wrong, he knew he was wrong. And that makes him guilty, that makes him guilty, that makes him guilty all day, every day, because he is sane and he knew the difference between right and wrong. And they have the temerity, the unmitigated gall to call him a good man. Good men don't sleep with other men's wives. Good men don't sit at their table when they know they're having an affair with the man's wife. Good men don't do what he did. Good men do not do this.
In the end, the jury found him guilty of the murder of Rusty, but that he was mentally ill. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Andrea was also in the shit. Remember when I said, she shouldn't have taken the witness stand? Well, she really shouldn't have taken the witness stand. She got 16 charges laid against her, multiple false statement charges and perjury charges, but most importantly, murder. That she was involved in her husband's death. That either she plotted with Hemy to kill Rusty, or that she manipulated Hemy into killing Rusty. Her friend Shayna said during Hemy's trial that Andrea called her the morning of Rusty's death, telling her that he had been shot and that she was on her way to hospital.
She immediately at the same time was screaming to me that Rusty had been shot and she didn't know if he was dead or alive, and she was on the way to the hospital.
However, she said on the stand she didn't know what happened to Rusty until she arrived at the hospital.
I didn't know what happened to Rusty until I got to the emergency room.
Okay.
No one told me what happened to Rusty.
So how would she know he had been shot? And why deny knowing it? She also deleted call and text logs between her and Hemy on the day of the murder. Now, the prosecution would later drop the murder charges. Quite simply, there just wasn't enough there to charge her with it, and they were afraid if they tried to charge her with it and she got off of it, she would get off of everything. So, whew, for Andrea. But not in the court of public opinion. On the remaining 13 charges, she was found guilty of 9.
Your Honor, I'm here to ask
for your leniency for the sake of my children, Sophia and Ian. There was no physical romance between Mr. Newman and me. No sex, no kissing, nothing, other than putting my head on his shoulder to cry and holding his hand on one occasion to comfort him. I was never leaving my true love, Rusty, and our children. I later took the stand at Mr. Newman's murder trial because I wanted to prove that he was sane. I did not prepare for my testimony. I didn't review any emails, and I ignored all the people who told me not to testify. I was shocked when the prosecution began attacking me.
She received 5 years in prison. She was out on parole after 22 months. Rusty's family filed a lawsuit against her for wrongful death. It was settled out of court, so we don't know what the settlement was, but interesting, you might say. In 2015, the Georgia Supreme Court reversed Hemy's convictions. This was due to some confidential documents, mental health ones. They were brought into evidence when they were confidential, they shouldn't have been. In 2016, he went on trial once again. He was found guilty once again, though this time without the mental illness part. Just straight up guilty. He was once again sentenced to life without parole. And so ends, this whole one. I don't think we'll ever really know the full extent of Andrea's involvement, if any, in the death of Rusty Sneiderman. Was Hemy just a guy who had some mental health issues and unrequited love for Andrea led him to something? Or was Hemy manipulated by Andrea into killing her husband and she then got off scot-free? Was Andrea the victim of a stalker? Hemy who just wouldn't leave her alone and he eventually killed her beloved husband? Or did they plot it together? Even if she really had nothing to do with the murder of her husband, it is highly likely she did have an affair with Hemy. She did lie to police officers and made false statements. So even if she didn't know it at the time, her behavior, one way or another, did trigger a man to murder Rusty. Rusty, a man who definitely didn't deserve to die. It's a weird triangle. But there you have it. Shinee. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to do so and be here with me. Go on. Here, I'll see you as always real soon in the next old video. Until then, please, and I mean it, look after yourselves. Take care. Bye, care.